In the heart of West Africa lay the peaceful kingdom of Akanra, where the warm sun kissed golden fields and the rivers sang stories older than memory. Life was simple. People farmed, traded, raised families, and gathered at night around fires to tell stories. But hidden among these gentle days was the beginning of a tale that would reshape the world, the story of a boy named Kato. Kato was born in a small village at the edge of Akanra. His father was a humble blacksmith, the kind who worked from dawn to dusk, battering sparks from iron to make tools for the community. His mother tended to herbs, healing the sick and comforting those in pain. Their home was small, made of hardened mud and straw, but filled with laughter and a love that no invader could take away. From childhood, Kato was different. He asked questions that made adults shift uneasily. Why do kingdoms conquer others? Why must the weak bow to the strong? Why can't peace protect itself? These questions lingered in the air, troubling his father, who believed survival was earned quietly, not loudly. Still, Kato learned strength from him, not just in muscle, but in discipline. He learned how to turn rocks into blades, how to shape metal into something useful. Every time his hammer struck metal, his heart beat with a silent promise. One day he would protect his people. The kingdom of Akanra, though peaceful, carried scars. Long ago, men from distant northern lands, pale, armored, and cruel, had come. They took gold, food, and even people, dragging them away to unknown fates. Kato had seen these horrors when he was only 8. He remembered the flames, the screams, and the strange flags held by tall men who spoke in cold tongues. His mother shielded him that night, whispering that the world could be cruel, but that courage was a fire no army could extinguish. That night planted a seed in him, one that would grow into an unbreakable resolve. As Kato grew, he trained not with soldiers but with shadows. He ran through forests, climbed mountains, and learned the whispers of the wind. He mastered bows from hunters, spears from warriors, and strategy from old storytellers who knew of battles fought before time had a name. He was young, but his mind was sharp, able to see patterns where others noticed only chaos. His teachers often said he could look into tomorrow and see what others could not. While Kato grew stronger, the kingdom changed. The old king struggled to manage rival nobles and threats beyond the borders. Every year, the invaders returned, sometimes as traitors, sometimes as thieves wearing the masks of peace. Gold left Akanra, fear remained. The people whispered that another attack was coming, one bigger than anything before. Hope dimmed and even the bravest warriors felt powerless. Then fate struck unexpectedly. The king of Akanra died suddenly, leaving no heir. The kingdom trembled as chaos took root. Nobles fought for the throne, each wanting power for themselves rather than protection for the people. Villages were left undefended. Law faltered. Darkness seemed to rise again, but in these uncertain days, something surprising happened. People remembered the boy who protected his village during the last raid. The boy who fought off bandits twice his size. The boy who stood guard at the gates even when no one asked him to. They spoke of Kato. His name spread from village to village, across forests and rivers, until it reached the ears of elders in the royal capital. The nobles mocked the idea of a blacksmith's son becoming king. They believed bloodlines, not courage, built thrones, but the people rose. They gathered in the capital, their voices united. They demanded a leader who cared for them, not for gold. When Kato arrived, dusty from travel, they knelt, not because he demanded it, but because he had earned their trust. In a council where anger and pride boiled, Kato spoke only one sentence: a king protects his people. His voice held no arrogance, only certainty. The nobles argued for hours, but the people outside chanted his name with a power no army could stop. And so, through the will of the people, Kato became king. He took no crown of jewels, only a simple band of iron, forged by his own hands. His first command was not to celebrate, but to rebuild. He walked the streets, spoke with farmers, fishermen, and traders, learning their fears and hopes. He trained with soldiers, not above them. He reminded everyone that strength lived in unity, not in titles. While peace returned for a moment, dark news traveled across the sea. The greatest European empire, Valderan, had heard of Akanra's riches, gold beyond measure. Their king believed no African kingdom could resist them. In his palace of marble, he declared they would claim Akanra as they had countless lands before. They prepared the most powerful army Europe had ever sent. Back in Akanra, whispers returned. People feared what was coming. Advisors begged Cato to surrender if attacked, but he did not tremble. He listened to the land, to the people, and to his own heart. He knew the invaders were coming, but he also knew something they didn't. Akanra's strength was not its gold, but its people, and a leader who had once promised that his land would never bow again. And thus the silent beginning of a storm began, not with swords drawn, but with a king ready to risk everything to protect the land that raised him. Far beyond the shores of Akanra, across waters that stretched like silver glass under the sun, the empire of Valderan flourished in splendor and arrogance. Its banners, marked with a golden serpent, flew over lands from the north's frozen peaks to the valleys where olives grew forever green. Their soldiers marched with iron discipline. Their kings spoke as if the world itself bent to their command. They believed no land lay beyond their conquest, no people beyond their rule. The current ruler, King Albrecht Roman IV, sat upon a marble throne carved with stories of his ancestors' victories. His pride was legendary, so was his thirst for wealth. One evening, as he sat in his great war hall, a merchant arrived from beyond the southern seas. He spoke breathlessly of a hidden kingdom, Akan, filled with gold so pure it could light a room in darkness. He claimed dust from the rivers, shone brighter than Valderan's finest treasures. Intrigued, Albrecht demanded more. The merchant described a land with untouched forests, rivers filled with diamonds, and people who lived simply, unaware of their riches. But what caught Albrecht's attention most was the mention of a new king, young and inexperienced, a child king. The merchant laughed, one who does not understand power. Albrecht's generals leaned in. A weak ruler meant an easy conquest, gold without resistance, glory without sacrifice. The king's eyes gleamed. Prepare the ships. He ordered, we will bring this Akanra into the arms of Valderan. The empire moved swiftly. For months, they prepared a massive force unlike any the southern lands had seen. They did not intend merely to conquer Akanra. They intended to erase its name. 20,000 soldiers were chosen, the finest from Valderan's battle, hardened legions. Cannons of dark iron were pulled from the forges, their roars able to shatter walls. Rifles were cleaned, polished, and blessed. Armor was layered in steel, so heavy that no enemy blade could pierce it. Every weapon spoke of confidence. Every soldier marched with a belief. No one could stand before Valderan. As the army prepared, word traveled across Europe. Some doubted the need to send so many men against a small African kingdom. But Albrecht silenced them with a single statement. When we conquer completely. Back in Akanra, King Cato gathered his council in a simple hut made of clay and wood. Maps lay across the table, drawn by hunters and travelers, maps that showed rivers twisting like serpents, forests thick with secrets, and mountains that touched clouds. Unlike Valderan, Akanra did not build great stone cities. What they had was the land itself, raw, wild, and familiar. Cato listened carefully to every scout who returned from the coast. Some whispered they had seen massive black ships with iron mouths, the cannons, resting like sleeping beasts. Others described soldiers with pale skin and metal skins that shone like mirrors in the sun. The council trembled. We cannot defeat such power. One elder warned, their numbers alone will crush us. Another begged Cato to send gifts, gold, ivory, spices, as tribute. Let us pay for peace, he pleaded. But Cato remembered the night when invaders came during his childhood, when tribute had changed nothing. He leaned forward, his eyes burning with resolve. Peace bought with fear is slavery. He said, we will not bow. He walked to the palace courtyard where soldiers trained. They paused as he approached. Unlike kings of other lands, Cato wore no jewels, only the iron headband he had forged himself. He raised his voice so all could hear. The storm approaches. They think we are weak. They think our land is theirs to take, but they do not know us. They do not know our rivers, our forests, our spirits. They will learn. His words spread like fire. Villagers, fishermen, hunters, and warriors united. Women prepared medicines, children gathered arrows, old men whispered ancient strategies. The kingdom became one heart beating to the same rhythm. Meanwhile, the armada of Valderan carved through the ocean. Their cannons lined the decks, their flags snapped in the wind, their soldiers laughed, thinking of the easy victory ahead. They imagined returning home covered in gold, praised as heroes, but as they neared Acanra, the waters grew uneasy. Storms brewed suddenly, winds screamed. Some ships were swallowed by the sea before ever touching land. The soldiers whispered, asking if the southern gods were angry, yet they pressed on. Eventually, the surviving ships anchored on the coast. The soldiers disembarked, raising their banners in triumph. No one resisted. The beaches were empty, quiet, and that made the invaders smile. They believed the people had already fled in fear. They marched forward, deeper into the land. At first, everything seemed peaceful, but Cato had instructed his people not to engage. He wanted Valderan to think Acanra was defenseless. The empire set up camp in the forests, confident and careless. Then strange things began to happen. Soldiers awoke to missing supplies, their food spoiled overnight. Fires refused to burn. At night, they heard drums in the distance, soft, haunting rhythms echoing through the trees. Some soldiers swore they saw shadows moving among the leaves, watching them with silent eyes. The generals dismissed these fears. The jungle frightens weak hearts, they mocked. But each morning, more soldiers disappeared without a trace. The wind carried whispers of unseen warriors. The tall grasses shivered though there was no breeze. Fear crept into the hearts of Valderan's legion. Cato watched from afar, blending with the forest as if he were part of it. He did not attack, not yet. He allowed fear to grow like vines, slowly tightening around the enemy. He knew Valderan relied on intimidation, but here in Acanra they were strangers, blind and deaf to the land's voice. The more they marched inward, the more lost they became. Their maps proved useless. Rivers they crossed vanished when they tried to find them again. Trees seemed to move. One night, as thunder rolled across the sky, King Albrecht's commander looked into the forest and whispered, "This land is alive." And somewhere in that darkness, Cato whispered back, "You have stepped into the heart of Acanra, and here you will learn fear." The Europeans had arrived with cannons and pride, but they had underestimated the quiet, patient strength of a king who knew every corner of his homeland. What they thought would be a quick conquest was becoming something else entirely, a slow descent into a place where their power meant nothing. The storm had come, but it was not the one Valderan expected. As night fell over the great forests of Acanra, Valderan's soldiers huddled around dying fires, clutching their rifles with trembling hands. They had marched inland with confidence, believing they would crush the kingdom in days, but now they felt the trees watching them. Even the wind seemed to whisper warnings. It was as if the land itself rejected their presence. King Cato stood at the edge of the cliffs overlooking their camp, his warriors hidden in the shadows behind him. He studied the enemy movements, counting their guards, observing their campfires, waiting for the moment when fear would overwhelm discipline. Cato understood something that Valderan did not. War was not always won by the strongest army. It was won by the army that understood the battlefield, and here the battlefield itself favored Acanra. Just before dawn, as mist curled over the ground, Cato gave a simple command, "Begin." Like ghosts, Acanra's warriors emerged from the darkness. They moved silently, their feet barely touching the soil. They did not strike with swords or spears. They struck with confusion. They cut ropes, stole food, moved supplies deep into the forest. Some crept into tents and took rifles, replacing them with useless sticks. When morning came, panic swept through the camp. Soldiers shouted at one another, accusing their own of betrayal. Generals demanded answers that no one could give. Valderan tried to advance, but every step felt heavier. Their armor made them slow. Their cannons could not be pushed through the thick jungle. Their horses slipped on muddy trails. Drums sounded in the distance, steady, slow, haunting. Sometimes they felt close, sometimes far away. There was never silence. At night, glowing eyes watched from the dark. The soldiers did not know if they belonged to animals, or something worse. Cato used no grand formations. He divided his small army into many groups. Each group struck separately, from different angles at different times. One moment, arrows rained from above; the next, a hidden spear struck from behind a tree. But just as suddenly as they appeared, the warriors vanished, leaving Valderin to swing blindly at empty air. The invaders could not understand how men with such simple weapons controlled every corner of the land. Days passed, the forest became a prison, food dwindled, men collapsed from exhaustion, the sun offered no comfort, only heat that burned skin and dried throats. The rivers, once a source of life, now brought fever. Even the most disciplined soldiers began to shake with fear. Their minds, trained for open battlefields, could not comprehend the invisible enemy. King Cato studied their suffering with a heavy heart. He did not enjoy their pain, but he understood it was necessary. He knew that a direct battle would only lead to Acanra's destruction. Valderin had to be broken slowly, from the inside. The war is not with their weapons. He told his commanders one night, but with their minds, if we break their courage, their bodies will fall easily. The Europeans tried to adapt. They cut trees to open the forest, but their tools broke against the thick wood. They tried to track the warriors, but every trail ended in deception. They sent scouts forward, but scouts never returned. Men began to whisper that the land was cursed, that the spirits of Acanra would not let them leave. One evening, under heavy rain, a group of Valderin soldiers reached a riverbank, only to realize the bridge they had crossed earlier was gone. In its place stood Cato's men, hidden high in the trees. Torches burned like stars above the water. The soldiers fired their rifles wildly, but the rain killed their sparks. Shadows jumped from branch to branch. When the assault came, it was swift and silent. By morning, the river washed away pale armor, stained with red. The commanders gathered in a collapsing tent, studying maps that no longer made sense. Roads shifted. The jungle changed every day. This land is alive, one whispered. Albrecht's commander slammed his fist against the table. The land is not alive. These people are clever. We will crush them. But his voice betrayed fear. They decided to retreat toward the coast, hoping to regroup. Yet every path they took looped back into the deeper jungle. The forest seemed endless. In their desperation, they fired cannons blindly into the trees. The explosions echoed like thunder, shaking animals from the branches. But not a single Acanra warrior fell. Moments later, a whispering wind pushed the smoke back into their camp. Men choked, stumbled, fell. As they staggered onward, they began to hear something new, singing. Soft voices, carried by the wind, spoke of ancestors of the land of freedom. It was not a war cry. It was a promise. The voices reminded the soldiers that Acanra was not just defended by men, but held together by generations of history. The singing pierced their hearts. Many dropped their weapons, falling to their knees in despair. The final trap came when they reached a valley surrounded by steep walls. They believed it was a path to the sea. But when they descended, they saw fires ignite around the rim of the valley, one after another, like a ring of light. Drums thundered. Thousands of warriors appeared on the cliffs, their silhouettes reflecting the flames. Then Cato stepped forward, riding a dark horse. He wore simple black armor painted with ash. The rain stopped as if the sky itself waited for his words. His voice carried across the valley. You came here believing we would bow. You thought your power was greater than our spirit, but you stand now in the heart of Acanra. You do not command this land. You are consumed by it. The warriors roared. Arrows rained like a storm. The few cannons Valderin had left misfired. Many soldiers tried to climb out of the valley, but the cliffs were too steep. The Acanra warriors surged forward, moving as one body. The invaders fought desperately, but their exhaustion betrayed them. One by one they fell. When dawn arrived, the valley was silent. The once mighty army of Valderin, Europe's greatest, lay defeated, and at the center stood Cato, a quiet king with eyes full of sorrow and strength. He had saved his people, not through overwhelming force, but through wisdom, patience, and an unbreakable bond with the land. He raised his spear to the sky. The warriors cheered his name. Acanra had survived the storm, not because of luck, but because a king who knew every river, every tree, Every breath of wind had turned the land itself into a shield. And far across the ocean, the world would soon learn of the Black King who defeated an empire. In the days following the great victory, the kingdom of Akanra was filled with both celebration and silence. Word spread quickly, faster than traders' ships could sail, that a young Black King had stood against Europe's greatest army and triumphed. Around evening fires, storytellers spoke of shadows that swallowed soldiers whole, spirits that guarded the land, and a king who moved like the wind. But among these stories, one truth remained. Cato had saved his kingdom. The people praised their king, yet Cato did not bask in glory. When he walked through the villages, he saw the faces of families who had lost sons and daughters. He helped rebuild homes, carried water with the workers, and comforted grieving families with his own hands. His humility made him more beloved than any victory could. To him, the true cost of war was etched into every scarred tree and silent home. Foreign traders came to Akanra seeking alliances and wealth, hoping to learn the secret behind Cato's victory. Some came with respect, others with hidden greed. Envoys from far kingdoms offered ships, spices, and metals in exchange for trade. Cato welcomed those who approached with open hearts, but he turned away those whose eyes glittered with selfishness. He knew that victory did not end danger, it only changed it. In the royal court, his advisors urged him to build a stronger army, fearing Valderan would return with greater force. "We have defeated them once," they said, "but they may come again. We must be ready." Cato listened quietly, but his answer surprised them. "Our strength is not in iron or cannons. It is in the land, in the people. If they come again, they will find the same truth they found before." Despite the council's concerns, peace seemed to hold. Yet whispers traveled across the villages. Strange ships had been seen on distant shores. Merchants spoke of new armies gathering in foreign lands. Some believed Valderan would seek revenge. Others thought they would never return, discouraged by their humiliating defeat. But Cato felt something deeper. A king's heart, he believed, must always stay awake. Months passed and the kingdom flourished. Farmers returned to their fields. Children ran through the forests without fear. Markets filled with color and music. The wounds of war began to fade, though they were never forgotten. Cato spent his days among the people more than in the palace. He gave his wealth to rebuild villages rather than construct monuments. He refused titles of honor, preferring to be called simply Cato of Akanra. Yet, even as peace grew, the quiet king became restless. He would often stand alone on the palace rooftop at night, looking toward the distant mountains. He had won the greatest battle of his time, but his heart carried an unseen weight. He had learned that power, whether taken or given, was fragile like a flame in the wind. To protect his people, he believed one must stand with them, not above them. One evening, when the moon hung low and silver clouds rolled like waves across the sky, Cato disappeared from the palace. He left quietly, taking no guards, no servant. It's only a simple spear and the cloak he wore. At the gate, a young soldier saw him leaving and asked where he was going. Cato smiled gently and said, "The people have strength in themselves now. I have given all I can. It is time for Akanra to walk forward without being led." The next morning, the palace was in an uproar. The council searched every chamber, every hall, every corner of the capital. At last, they found a small letter on the king's bed. It carried only a few words written by his hand. "A king does not belong to the throne. He belongs to his people. As long as you remember your strength, I am with you." Some believed he had gone to the mountains in search of spiritual guidance. Others believed he had left to help distant lands that were suffering. Many in Akanra thought he had passed into the realm of the ancestors, becoming a guardian spirit who walked among the trees. And some whispered that Cato still lived as a wanderer, protecting the innocent in faraway lands where oppression ruled. No one ever found his body. No one heard news of his capture. It was as if he had become part of the land he loved, hidden among its rivers, carried in its winds, spoken through its leaves. Time moved on, and the kingdom continued to stand strong. Without Cato, the people learned to guide themselves. They built schools where children learned not only to read and write, but to understand courage, kindness, and unity. They told stories of Kato to each new generation, reminding them that greatness came not from birth or wealth, but from heart and purpose. Travelers who visited Akanra would often hear tales about him. Some said they had seen a tall figure in black armor wandering through forests, always appearing when danger threatened. Others said they met a quiet man on lonely roads who helped without asking for anything, then vanished like a breeze. A few claimed they heard his voice in the mountains during storms, whispering to the people that they were never alone. Whether these stories were true or legends, they kept Kato alive, not as a ruler, but as an eternal protector. Years turned into decades, and the world changed. Valderan fell into civil war, its arrogance crumbling under the weight of greed and betrayal. Many believed it was a curse for trying to break a land that refused to bow. Akanra, on the other hand, continued to thrive. Its forests remained untouched, its rivers flowed strong, and its people lived with pride. At the anniversary of the great battle, the people gathered around the valley where Valderan's army had fallen. They lit fires and sang songs of Kato. Children wore wooden crowns and carried simple iron bands like the one their king had forged for himself. The elders closed their eyes and spoke of the day when Kato rode out of the flames to defend his people. Some said that on these nights, if one stayed quiet and listened closely, they could hear footsteps walking in the forests, steady, calm, familiar. Kato had become more than a king. He had become a legend, a symbol of freedom, not only for Akanra, but for every land that believed it was too small to rise against tyranny. His story traveled across oceans. In distant kingdoms, people spoke of the Black King who defeated an empire with wisdom, courage, and love. Generations later, when travelers reached Akanra and asked about its heroes, the villagers would smile and say, "Our greatest king was the one who chose to disappear, because he trusted his people to stand strong without him. And so, though his body vanished from history, his spirit never did." Kato remained in the songs, in the trees, in the hearts of his people, forever known as the Black King who defeated Europe's greatest army and chose humility over power, freedom over fame, and his people over himself. He did not remain on the throne, but he remained in the soul of Akanra, and there he still lives.